Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda, and please welcome to our Operation Freedom platform, WeThePeopleProcessing.com. You know, are you tired of being threatened to be canceled just because you have a company focused on liberty and freedom? Well, worry no more, folks. WeThePeopleProcessing.com is your go-to merchant services, freedom-based company to provide business service payment solutions. We the People Processing provides their clients a cancel culture-free platform which is domestically based. They provide competitive rates, no contracts with next-day funding, a fully vetted and like-minded financial infrastructure, and full support for integrations, implementation, and e-commerce efforts. Bottom line, WeThePeopleProcessing.com focuses on defending your company's free market growth, values, and future. Check them out at www.WeThePeopleProcessing.com. Once you're on the site, enter in password Operation Freedom or call 855-499-2024. That's WeThePeopleProcessing.com. Then, when on the website, enter Operation Freedom as your password or call 855-499-2024. One of my regular guests on this platform and a fan favorite is our first guest, Michael Cutler. Mike has 30 years experience with the former Immigration and Naturalization Service. Positions included, and there were many that Mike had. He was an immigration inspector assigned to Kennedy International Airport in New York. He was an examiner to the unit which was responsible for adjudicating petitions filed by United States citizens and lawfully admitted permanent resident aliens on behalf of their alien spouses. Mike was a criminal investigator, a special agent, if you will, for the INS in New York City. He was the INS representative to the Unified Intelligence Division and a senior special agent assigned to the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. Bottom line, folks, Mike's career was unusual in that it provided him with a grand tour that gave him extensive insight into many aspects of immigration, also provided him with an intimate view on how immigration impacted other law enforcement agencies within the United States, and in fact, how it benefited every American citizen. His website is phenomenal. Michael Cutler, C-U-T-L-E-R, michaelcutler.net. My honor to welcome back my friend, Mike Cutler. Mike, welcome back to the Operation Freedom platform.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for that great introduction. And I'm glad you're using my concept of the Bucket Brigade of Truth, because that's really what we need to counteract the lies and the propaganda. I like quoting Orwell, but I also like quoting Voltaire. Voltaire said you judge a person's intelligence by the questions they ask. My dad taught me that the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. And, of course, the politicians from both parties really don't want people asking questions, because it's through questions that we can make them accountable. But I also like another quote from Voltaire. And think about this. And I happen to be Jewish. By the way, those of you of the Jewish faith, we're celebrating the beginning of our new year, but no matter how you measure the year, I hope that all of you have a healthy, happy, and peaceful new year coming up. But think of what happened during the Holocaust. Think where we are now. Here's the Voltaire quote that personally sent chills down my spine. Those who make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Just think about that statement from brilliant Voltaire. And before I get into what I want to talk about today, and that's what Biden has done to this country in the last 2 weeks, I want to start out by telling you it's not one or the other party. It's both parties that have done incredible damage because of the push for globalism. I used to lock horns with George W. Bush when he was the president. To their credit, the Republican members of Congress frequently called me to testify at hearings where I disputed what the president was saying and doing. And he just gave a speech. USA Today published the speech where he called out American extremists, compared them to Islamic radicals. And let me be clear, anybody who has a grievance and thinks that violence is the solution is a problem and needs to be stopped. And I don't care what your citizenship is. I don't care what your issue is. I might even agree with you on issues, but if you think the way we get to solving that problem is through violence, then you and I have a huge disagreement. I'm a big proponent of the First Amendment, the right for peaceable assemblage. Underscore peaceable 100 times. Peaceable. That's why we need to have freedom of speech, so we can ask the questions to hold those in positions of authority accountable. But it was interesting because Bush called out Americans whom he referred to as nativists. How dare you be a nativist? I've been accused of being a nativist by others. And let me tell you, I stand guilty as charged, because here is the definition of nativism, and this by itself tells you where the heads are for these idiots, besides up their tailpipes. Nativism, this is according to the dictionary, is the political policy of promoting the interests of native inhabitants against those of immigrants, including the support of immigration restriction measures. That is why the Immigration Act was passed back in 1951, to make certain that Americans would not have to compete with foreign workers. That predates it. In fact, when we were in the Depression, President Roosevelt ramped up immigration enforcement for precisely that purpose, to protect the jobs and wages for hardworking Americans. So today, what used to be a virtue is now a vice. The immigration laws aren't about race or religion. It's about making certain we don't allow criminals and terrorists and spies and child molesters and human traffickers into our country. And if you take that position, good old George W., who I told had meltdowns every time I testified before Congress or appeared on television, says that it is evil to be a nativist and put your fellow American first. If that doesn't summarize where we are and how we got here, God help us. And people say to me, well, wait a minute, George W., well, he was a neocon, right? He really wasn't a Republican. He was a Republican in name only. He was a rhino. Folks, he was the President of the United States. 2 speakers of the House, at least, were of the same ilk. So think about where we are. This is both parties putting Americans not first but last. And if you wonder why people went after Donald Trump, that's why, because he tried to put Americans first. Now, maybe you didn't like the way he articulated his ideas. I didn't always agree with Donald Trump. But I think of him, and you could relate to this, Dave, I think of him as a competent physician who had terrible bedside manner. I don't care what your bedside manner is. If you could cure me or heal a family member, you can be as poor at bedside manner as you want to be. I want results. And he was delivering the results, and that sent the leaders from both parties into a frenzy. And now we get to Joe Biden, who is sending me, frankly, into a frenzy. I write for Front Page Magazine frequently. I've been affiliated with them since 2014. My latest article for them was published August 31st, Biden's catastrophic policies, immigration, and Afghanistan. And I talked about the parallels, how because of the sanctuary cities that we're seeing throughout America today, because of the Democrats, sanctuary states giving driver's licenses to illegal aliens who can't prove who they are. And motor vehicles have become the weapon of choice for terrorists around the world, by the way. And if you don't believe it, look at all the barriers to car bombs and truck bombs you see all over the United States. But we have no idea who we're putting behind the wheel of vehicles. And once someone gets a driver's license from anywhere in the United States, they can go anywhere in the United States, rent a truck or a car, and carry out an attack. Think how insane this is, okay? Well, because of Biden turning tail and running us out of Afghanistan literally overnight, 5,000 terrorists were turned loose in Afghanistan. These were people who were captured at great expense, not just financial and efforts, but how many soldiers, I wonder, American, Afghan, NATO, how many soldiers were killed or injured capturing these dirtbags? Arrests entail risk. I made thousands of arrests, and I've seen people, because of an arrest operation, wind up in the emergency room. Arrests are dangerous. 5,000 arrested terrorists had to come with a huge cost to our men and women and men and women of other allied countries out there. Released because of what Biden did. And when he says this nonsense, well, we had to get out of Afghanistan. Okay, fine. It wasn't what we did, it's how we did it. Imagine an airplane pilot landing when the tower tells him, you know what, the weather conditions aren't acceptable. Circle the airport for a while before you land because visibility is zero. And this hotshot says, oh, heck, I can do this. and he crashes the airplane and kills everyone on board. Well, he certainly got the airplane down, but I don't think it's the way that anybody wanted it to land on the ground. And that's what Biden did. He has turned Afghanistan into a sanctuary for those 5,000 terrorists that is now attracting terrorists from all over the world, proving to them that they were right and we were wrong on the 20th anniversary of the worst terror attack ever carried out on American soil. Think about the enormity of that betrayal. Donald Trump was impeached not once but twice, and for a phone call. Billions of dollars in weaponry were lost to the Taliban and consequently are now in the hands of terrorists. You could go to the Justice Department website and read article after article, news release after news release of people prosecuted by U.S. government prosecutors for providing weapons or materials to foreign countries that have military purpose. It could be something as simple as a gun site. Sell a gun site that goes to Iran or goes to Russia or North Korea. I promise you, you will not be worrying about food or shelter for years. You will get free food and free shelter if you like living in a cage. And here we gave the Taliban billions of dollars of the best weaponry America has. We also, because of that, allowed the Taliban to have access to the databases of everybody who cooperated with the United States. A popular theme in Mission Impossible and other spy movies, also Skyfall, was the list of cooperators falling into the hands of our enemy. Well, that was a movie. It happened in real life. Because one of the things that happened when Bagram fell, when that airport fell, was the databases of all the cooperators are now in the hands of the Taliban. That means each and every person and his or her families are probably going to wind up getting killed and tortured because of that alone. And now that they have the names of the cooperators, think how easily it would be for terrorists to enter the United States, because we're flooding America with thousands of people without the ability to vet them, and take on the false identity of the people who were cooperators. So now we've told them who they have to claim to be to get through the vetting process. Thank you, Joe Biden. He also has flooded America on the southern border with many, many illegal aliens, just flooding them in and allowing the Border Patrol, ordering the Border Patrol to become the last element of the biggest human trafficking operation in the history of the United States of America. Normally, the Border Patrol and ICE agents, and I did this, I was part of the anti-smuggling unit in New York, we used to stake out the international airport and the domestic airport and the bus terminals and the train stations because the illegal aliens from California and New Mexico and Arizona and Texas didn't stay there for long. They hopped on transportation and made their way to New York. We have a population of hundreds of thousands of illegal Mexicans living in New York City. How do you think they got here? They weren't beamed here by the Starship Enterprise. So we used to watch the terminals, and we would arrest them as they were coming off the planes or coming off the buses. Very often, believe it or not, they still had muddy boots, or the bottom of their boots were muddy from having waded across the Rio Grande. I kid you not. By the way, the term wetback isn't a pejorative. It used to be probable cause for the Border Patrol. If some guy was running north from the Rio Grande, they'd say, hey, look, there's a guy with a wet back. So they would pursue him and catch him because they knew the guy just came across the river. It's not a pejorative. It was just turned into a pejorative by this Orwellian nonsense that we're dealing with. So we would actually see people coming off the plane with boots encrusted with mud that had dried on their feet. So we're flooding America. Now, understand, it's not a crisis at the border. We keep hearing it. It's a crisis for the whole country because these people are going to be having hearings for the next 10 years, God only knows, if maybe longer, overwhelming that system that can't deal with the workload. And our immigration laws have nothing to do with race or religion. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's about keeping out aliens who pose a threat to national security, public safety, public health, and the jobs and wages of Americans. You have to be out of your mind or suicidal to not think we should enforce those laws. This is not about hating people. It's about loving Americans of every race, every religion, every ethnicity. America is the most diverse country in the world. So you can't say we want to enforce immigration laws out of racism. In New York, I'm a white Jewish guy. I'm in the minority. And I'm a New Yorker, and I would never imagine leaving New York. It's my hometown. This isn't about racism, but that's the allegation. And even the mainstream media, whether it's Fox News or whomever, oh, you're anti-immigrant if you don't want open borders, and you're pro-immigrant if you want anarchy. And the most likely victims of the crimes perpetrated by criminal aliens are the members of the ethnic immigrant communities themselves, and not just from Latin America, but from all over the world, because human nature is human nature. I've arrested aliens from just about everywhere but Antarctica. I work closely with the Israeli National Police, the Royal Canadian Mounted, the Brits, got an award from the government of Japan. Not one of those would be called Latinos, right? This is about human nature at its worst, and that's why we have law enforcement, because every race, religion, ethnicity has the good, the bad, and the ugly. So Joe Biden comes along, instead of pulling out the civilians first, instead of getting rid of the weapons, either by airlifting them out or blowing them up, use them for target practice for the bombers so that there's nothing usable, Joe Biden pulled out the military first. It's about sequence. You go to the pistol range, the command is usually ready, aim, fire. Joe Biden ordered fire, ready, aim. How does that work out? So understand what happened. Should we be out? We could have that debate. I'm not a military guy. I'm not going to get into that area because I'm not going to waste your time with my opinion. That's no better than anyone else's. That's not my area of expertise. But it's how he did it. It was the sequence that stranded how many Americans, how many allies, how many people from NATO. They talked about Donald Trump destroying NATO because he expected NATO to pay their fair share. So let's take that on real quickly. One of my all-time favorite presidents of the United States, Dwight David Eisenhower, was the Supreme Commander of Allied Forces during the Second World War, one of the key architects of D-Day, Operation Overlord, created NATO as a response to the rise of the Soviet Union and communism in Europe. And he then regretted the fact that although he created it, he couldn't get our allies to pay their fair share. Not very fair. He tried, couldn't succeed. A succession of members of Congress and presidents, both sides of the aisle, tried for years to get NATO members to pay up. Guess who got them to finally pay up? Donald Trump. And then they said, oh, he's trying to destroy NATO. No, he's trying to get NATO to live up to its responsibility as a true partner of the United States. Why are we footing the bill for everybody? That's not what Uncle Sam does. That's what Uncle Sap does. And Trump said enough is enough. He was a hard-headed businessman. Again, I didn't always agree with him. But certainly as a businessman, he knew that you can go bankrupt if you keep allowing everyone else to get a free lunch off of your dime. So what did Biden do to help our relationship with NATO? He pulled our troops out without notifying England or other leaders of NATO countries so that their citizens are now being held in Afghanistan. Do you think they will ever again trust Joe Biden or the United States after that? And what message does that send to our adversaries around the world about how this has become a gutless, spineless, paper-toothed tiger of a country, and we're supposed to be the leader of the free world, but maybe we're not? Because no one's asking Biden, what's the game plan? Where is the benefit for Americans that you did this? Now, I have to tell you, I lived through 9/11. And I will tell you, honestly, I spent most of the day crying yesterday watching TV because it brought back raw memories. On 9/11, those ashes from Ground Zero landed on my house and my neighbors died. On 9/11, I got phone calls from the Israeli National Police General, who I used to work with. He was back in Israel to make sure that my family and I survived the attack. On 9/11, I saw my neighbors trudging through my street, covered head to foot in the debris from the explosions at Ground Zero when the towers collapsed. And I remember days later seeing people in the middle of the night wandering like zombies through the streets and cars driving by, so many cars with American flags and a photo in the windows. Have you seen my wife? Have you seen my daughter? Have you seen my dad? They never saw those people again. And I remember on the night of 9/11, I called up a good friend who was a Secret Service supervisor. He was in Building 7 when it came down. And I called him late at night because I was afraid he didn't get home. His wife picked up the phone and said, Mike, your timing is perfect. Tommy just came through the door. I'll put him on, but I don't think he's going to be able to talk to you for long. And he was covered in debris. And what did he say to me on the phone? He said, Mike, thank you so much for calling. I'm going to spend 30 seconds with you and I'm hanging up. He said, this is the worst day of my life. I can't tell you the horrors I saw. He said, we had body parts bouncing off the windows of my office building. Stop and think of that imagery. They went out of the building and heard bodies exploding because when a body falls from that altitude, they don't land intact. Maybe they do in the movies. In reality, it's like a water balloon. The body bursts. So they were getting showered by body parts. 9/11. And now we're partnering with the Taliban. We're being told that they are professional and businesslike, the Taliban. And if you listen to the speeches of the generals about how bloodthirsty they are, they're our partners and they're professional and they are the people we're trusting. Why are we trusting them? Because Joe Biden painted us into that corner. If we had done things in an orderly, proper fashion, we would have had control over Bagram. We would have gotten all the civilians out. We would have gotten the databases out. We would have destroyed or removed all the weaponry, and there'd be no hostages. And to show you how things have changed, I don't know if you remember this, Dave. I'm sure you do. But when hostages were taken in Tehran back in 1979, and one of them, the chief resident security officer, was a guy I had worked with in New York. He was with the State Department. He was one of the hostages. ABC News started a program that lasted for many years afterwards called Nightline, because every night they would say, this is day 412 of captivity for the Americans in Tehran. And they would report on what was going on. And today the mainstream media acts as a propaganda arm for the insanity that we are witnessing at the hands of our own government. Immigration is the key to all of this. It was George W. Bush, by the way, who created what I call the Department of Homeland Surrender. Immigration was supposed to be a standalone agency. I know I was working with members of Congress unofficially to do this.